Dawn leaks over the lowlands like spilled pewter, laying a cold shine on canals and tiled roofs. You can hear the city waking carts rattling on cobbles, looms thumping behind shuttered windows, bells counting out the hour with a merchant's precision. Now picture yourself here with a cheap helmet biting your forehead, and a spear taller than your ceiling, waiting in a market square that smells of damp wool and horse. When the ground starts to tremble from an oncoming charge, you probably wouldn't survive if you stood alone, but you're not alone. That's the whole point of what Flanders is becoming. By the late 1200s, Flemish cities like Bruges, Ghent, and Ypres are rich enough to make kings jealous and counts nervous. Cloth is the engine. English woolen, finished textiles out, and guilds run these towns with a tight, almost corporate discipline. Political friction ignites when Count Guy of Dampierre clashes with the French crown, and urban weavers and fullers find themselves dragged into high feudal drama. The officially recognized spark that sets the mood is the Bruges Matins of 1302, a city uprising where citizens slaughter a French garrison. In a pre-dawn purge, it's ugly, but strategically it's the moment the towns commit to fighting for their autonomy. Here's where the militia spear wall is born from necessity. These aren't hereditary warriors. They're householders and guild brothers who can't afford war horses, so they organize as dense blocks of spearmen. And Godendag men, Godendag being that weird Flemish hybrid club spear that looks like a walking stick until it cracks a helmet. In battle, such formations function like a moving palisade. Front ranks kneel or brace shafts into the earth. Rear ranks push, and everyone's survival depends on keeping shoulders locked and points level. Their strength is collective discipline and the ability to turn city money into decent gear. Their weakness is obvious too if cohesion breaks. Armored cavalry can roll them up fast. The skills required are less about individual heroics and more about timing, stamina, and nerve. Hold steady, trust the man beside you, and obey shouted cues in a roar you can barely hear. A strange side fact the chronicles love is that some guilds drilled on Sundays in full kit, then marched straight to Mass, spears stacked outside the church like umbrellas. Scholars still debate whether this communal infantry was a Flemish one-off or an early cousin of later Swiss pike culture. Either way, the stage is set for the shock of knights meeting citizens who refuse to scatter. The militias don't spring up as a rabble. They grow out of the city's everyday machinery. Guild rolls double as muster lists, and the same hands that sort wool or hammer copper are suddenly counting spear lengths and ration sacks after Bruges Matins. The towns know retaliation is coming, so they formalize what had been ad hoc urban defense into something closer to a civic army. An officially recognized milestone often cited is the muster at Kortrijk in the summer of 1302, where contingents from Bruges, Ghent, Ypres, and smaller towns gather under their own banners. Not a lord's, recruitment is practical. Each guild provides a quota, usually the able-bodied householders and journeymen who can spare time from the looms. Training isn't nightly joust practice, it's formation drill. The men learn to march in step, to plant spear butts against the ground at a shouted signal, and to rotate tired front ranks backward without tearing the shape. The army functions like a mechanical press, pressure from behind, points in front, the whole block moving as one. They're also learning terrain reading where a line of ditches, a muddy meadow, or a narrow dike can make their spear wall feel twice as thick. Equipment reflects city wealth and workshop skill. Most carry long spears or early pikes, some have the Godendag for close quarters. Crossbowmen and slingers hover on the wings. Armor is mixed but not shabby steel caps, padded jacks, maybe a mail shirt for the prosperous, all produced locally. A lesser-known detail from town accounts is that guilds sometimes standardized shaft thickness and even paid fines for men who showed up with warped spears. Because a bend in the line could kill neighbors, the crossbow, expensive and regulated, is often issued by the city rather than owned privately, almost like communal property. Their strengths are clear by now: numbers, uniform drill, and a shared civic identity that makes hold the line feel like protecting your street. Weaknesses linger: too limited cavalry, uneven armor quality, and commanders who are elected or appointed from merchant elites rather than lifelong soldiers. So the militia needs specific skills, endurance in heavy kit, the humility to stay in rank, the reflex to lower points together, and the guts to ignore the thunder of hooves. In academic debate, some historians compare their discipline to later Swiss pike squares, while others argue the Flemings relied more on terrain and moral unity than on a fully professionalized system. However you slice it, the spear wall is becoming a city-made answer to feudal shock power. All of that drilling and municipal bookkeeping now has a deadline, because the French king's answer to Bruges is matins rolls toward Courtrai in armor and silk banners. On July 11, 1302, the Battle of the Golden Spurs, officially recognized in every major chronicle of the period, unfolds on a patchwork of fields and drainage ditches southeast of the town. The Flemings choose the ground like craftsmen choosing a workbench, firm enough for footing, but laced with wet hollows that will trip a charging horse. It's a small civic detail with enormous tactical weight. The French host is classic feudal muscle-mounted knights, noble retinues, and supporting infantry who expect the cavalry to decide the day. The Flemish army sets up in tight blocks, spears angled forward, golden dags tucked in, crossbowmen screening the front. When battle begins, the militia functions exactly as intended, a braced hedge that doesn't chase glory, only survival. Front ranks kneel and fix spear butts, rear ranks crowd close, turning the block into a living barricade. The French charge. It's not a scattered mob, but a wall that refuses to buckle, and the ditchy terrain breaks the momentum that cavalry lives on. Strengths show in slow motion, discipline under impact, collective push, and a deadly patience in letting the enemy come to them. Weaknesses lurk too. If the French had coordinated their infantry better or flanked with more care, those dense blocks could have been pinned and peeled apart. The skills demanded are brutally specific. Keep your spear level at the last heartbeat, read the officers, hand signals through dust, and resist the instinct to step back when a horse's shadow pours over you. Individual bravery matters, but only as obedience inside the formation. A strange side fact gives the battle its name. After the French collapse, Flemish soldiers gather hundreds of gilded spurs from fallen knights and hang them in Courtrai churches trophies, a civic flex more than a religious gesture. Scholars still debate how revolutionary this victory was. Some see it as an early infantry upset, akin to later Swiss triumphs, while others argue it's a terrain-assisted anomaly rather than a new universal model. But to everyone watching, in 1302, one thing is undeniable: city spearmen have just beaten the social order that said they couldn't. The shock of Courtrai doesn't freeze Flanders in triumph, it throws them into a long, messy afterlife of adaptation. The French crown can't let a citizen army's victory stand as a standing joke, so pressure returns almost immediately. An officially recognized follow-on event is the Battle of Menzenpevel in August 1304. Where the Flemish militias again meet the French in open war, but this time without quite the same home field advantage. The story turns from miracle to method. Can the spear wall work when the ground isn't tailor-made for it? At Menzenpevel, the militias bring the same core machine-dense pike and spear blocks with crossbow screens, but they learn that formation alone isn't a spell. The army still functions as a braced rectangle, rotating ranks, holding points steady, and absorbing cavalry shock. Yet the French have adjusted. They probe with infantry more actively, try to pin the blocks, and use repeated charges to fatigue the front. The Flemings fight hard and avoid annihilation, but they don't get a clean, cinematic repeat of Courtrai. That partial success teaches a lesson. The spear wall is strong as a core, but needs better skirmishing, clearer command, and smarter coordination between blocks. Strengths remain civic discipline and the ability to mass weapons quickly from town workshops. Weaknesses sharpen into focus, limited strategic mobility, uneven leadership in prolonged campaigns, and a vulnerability to being stretched or baited out of position. The skills required expand too. A militiaman now has to do more than stand firm. He must endure hours of fines, hold formation under heat and exhaustion, and follow complex signals that tell one block to advance while another anchors. In other words, they begin edging toward professionalism without fully becoming professionals. A lesser-known side fact from this period is that Flemish cities sometimes hired captains. From outside Flanders, Brabanters, Germans, even a few Italians too. Teach advanced drill, and town ledgers record payments for foreign counsel in the art of the long spear. That openness feeds academic debate. Some historians argue Flemish militias are a stepping stone toward the Swiss pike square and the broader infantry renaissance, while others say the Swiss and later German lanzknechts are genuinely different, more mobile, more standardized, less tied to urban politics. Either way, by 1304 the Flemings are no longer just the people who got lucky at Courtrai. They're a citizen army learning, painfully, how to stay dangerous. As the years stack up, the militias become less a single battlefield trick and more a reflection of city life under strain. You can almost feel the dual rhythm, the loom in the morning, the drill yard at dusk. Officially recognized events keep testing that rhythm. One of the clearest is the Battle of Cassel in 1328, when a Flemish revolt meets a reorganized French force. Cassel isn't just a fight, it's a warning label about what happens when civic infantry loses its situational advantages and political cohesion. By this stage, the army's battlefield function is well understood inside Flanders. The spear blocks are still the anvil, crossbowmen and lighter troops the hammer that tries to shape the enemy before impact. When terrain cooperates, dikes, hedgerows, marshy edges, the militias feel like a fortress that learned to walk. Their strengths are almost procedural. Rapid mobilization through guild networks, a shared urban identity that keeps men in line, and equipment that, while not uniform, is good enough to make a knight hesitate. But the weaknesses are equally procedural. City troops are part-time, long campaigns fray the economy, and the men's patience. Command can splinter along factional lines. One guild resents another. One city drags its feet while another surges ahead. And that political noise leaks into the battlefield as hesitation or uncoordinated moves. So the required skills keep shifting beyond courage and formation discipline. Militiamen need political trust, belief that the banner next to theirs won't suddenly withdraw, that their council at home will support the war through winter. They also need a kind of urban toughness, marching in heavy kit after a full workday, sleeping rough without the retinue comforts nobles take for granted. A smaller, stranger fact from guild records: some towns staged mock battles during festivals, complete with prize money for the neatest spear alignment, because leadership knew morale was as important as technique. The academic debate here gets sharper. Some scholars compare the Flemings to English longbow armies, both common or heavy forces that weaponized discipline, while others stress how fragile a militia model is compared to truly professional infantry like later Swiss or Italian formations. Cassel underlines the point: citizen spearmen can be terrifying, but only when city unity, terrain, and timing stay on their side. Even when the militias stumble, Europe can't unsee what Flanders revealed. After Cassel, the cities bend and bargain, sometimes under French pressure, sometimes in alliance with English kings chasing their own interests in the Low Countries. Yet the citizen spear doesn't vanish. It becomes part of the region's military common sense. An officially recognized late echo is the Flemish role in the opening phases of the 100 Years' War, where urban contingents and their pike habits influence how nearby powers think about infantry. Less glamorous than Creasy, but quietly formative. On battlefields across the 1300s, the Flemish model functions as a proof of concept. Dense infantry can hold, even break, heavy cavalry if cohesion and ground align. Neighbors notice. Brabant and Holland refine their own town levies. French commanders increasingly pair knights with disciplined foot, and mercenary companies borrow the long spear drill that Flanders standardized through guild logic. The strengths that travel are the simplest to copy: tight ranks, braced points, combined arms with crossbows, and the vulnerabilities travel too. Everyone learns that a spear wall is a machine that needs maintenance, steady training, competent captains, and a political structure that keeps part-time soldiers willing to show up. The skills expected of a spearman now feel almost modern, situational. Awareness, unit trust, the ability to switch from static defense to a controlled advance, and the humility to be a gear in a larger device. A lesser-known side fact from later municipal ordinances is that some cities required periodic spear inspections well into the 1400s, long after the Golden Spurs generation had died, because the civic memory of what saved us had hardened into law, and the debate widens. One academic camp frames Flemish militias as an early wave of the infantry revolution, a sibling to Swiss pike squares and, later, Landsknecht columns. Another insists their success is tightly bound to urban economics and local terrain, making them more of a regional adaptation than a universal turning point. But either way, their legacy is real. Feudal cavalry supremacy is no longer a natural law. It's a conditional advantage, and city spearmen helped write the fine print. Conclusion and effectiveness assessment. Looking back from the long corridor of medieval warfare, Flemish militias were effective not because they invented a brand new weapon, but because they reorganized society around an old one. The spear had always been cheap and lethal. What Flanders added was a civic system that could mass it, drill it, and emotionally bind men to it. In their best moments, Courtrai above all the militias exploited three linked variables: discipline density, smart terrain selection, and an enemy culture that assumed infantry would flinch. When those variables aligned, they didn't just survive a charge, they turned cavalry's weight into a liability. Operationally, their formations worked as defensive engines. A braced spear wall could stall horses, disrupt knightly cohesion, and create a killing zone for Godendags and crossbows. That's their battlefield strength. Their weakness was endurance over time, as part-time soldiers tied to guild calendars. And city politics, they struggled in prolonged wars, on open ground or under divided leadership. Kassel and the hard fighting at Menzenpevel show that the model wasn't magic. It was context-dependent. The human skill set they cultivated was remarkable for its era: collective nerve, drill obedience, and the ability to read microterrain. They trained ordinary artisans to perform a professional act-holding formation, under shock without turning them into permanent soldiers. That tension is why historians argue over their place in military evolution. Were they pioneers of the wider European shift toward infantry primacy, or a brilliant local answer that others later reinvented more fully? The truth probably sits between. Flemish militias were an early, uneven prototype of something bigger. Effectiveness, then, is measured in impact as much as win-loss records. They proved feudal knights could be beaten by citizens who stood together. After that, European war planners had to respect the foot soldier again, and once that door opened, it never really closed.